Hello and welcome to Deprogrammed. This is the New Culture Forum show where we do our best to fight back against the forces of ideological conformity, especially among the young. My name is Harrison Pitt. I am a fellow at the New Culture Forum, and I'm thrilled to be joined today, as ever, by Connor Tomlinson, who is senior editor at Courage Media, and our special guest this week, Lucy White, the commentator and public policy specialist. Lucy, thank you very much for joining us. Connor, thanks for being here, as always. So I'll start with you, Connor. Little by little, the online right makes its gains, and we have been, if we are the online right, have been reshaping the discourse pretty considerably over the last year or so. And recently we saw the Royal College of Policing coming out and instructing police forces to start recording ethnicity data. This is an advance on where we were a year ago. What do you think we should be demanding next in order to shape things nationally?
Well, I think it should be for all crimes, because I think this isn't for every single crime, as far as I understand, and also to keep them honest about which ethnic categories are being recorded. Because as we've seen with police data in America recently, they've started including Hispanics, for example, as white. And if you look at the mugshots versus some of the ethnic descriptions, because they wanted to inflate the numbers and make certain communities look less bad, well, it doesn't quite match up. And we're almost guaranteed to see probably the same thing happen here, because, of course, the police were very eager to not report on the grooming gang scandal for fear of inflaming community tensions. And nothing inflames community tensions like all the stats that Rob Bates and the Centre for Migration Control have been putting out, where 47% of sex offences in London are committed by foreign nationals, even more if we had the ethnic breakdown, of course, because that doesn't count second-generation migrants, which are likely to repeat criminal patterns of their parents. No shock, the top 10 nations guilty of this, the sort of rape Olympics, are all Islamic nations. Afghanistan right at the top. The treacherous previous government, of course, took out the super injunction to battery farm members of the Taliban and members of the corrupt Afghan administration, but also Afghan sex offenders at our expense, hence the massive protests outside the asylum hotels that have been happening across the country. And then the other thing the police should be doing, and I wouldn't hold my breath for this, is to stop treating the people that notice this problem and protest against it as terrorists. They've just dedicated a new anti-terror unit that was set up to monitor ISIS posts online, to monitor anti-migrant sentiment. They're now rolling out facial recognition vans across more of the police forces in England and Wales, and they are undoubtedly going to be used at these protests to better identify people who are attending them, to then place Section 46 orders to prevent them from showing up.
That's right.
Even if it's just mums and daughters doing a conga line versus the stand-up to racism protesters they're bussing out to provoke said mums and daughters into having a pretext to clamp down on them. So what the police need to do is, one, be transparent, and two, stop penalising the native host population, and instead arrest, detain and then deport the migrant sex offenders who shouldn't be here in the first place.
Yeah, it's a very strange way we've been living over the last 30 to 40 years or so. Not only have we been subjected to a very perverse demographic experiment, extremely perverse anti-democratic demographic experiment, but we've also been forbidden, out of sound morals and good taste, from examining the results of this experiment. It's a very anti-experimental attitude to take, actually, not to take an interest in whether things go well. But this has become untenable, which is why increasingly the information vacuum itself is a grievance in a way that it wasn't so much before. And we are making these demands for greater transparency in the data, but I think you're right, they are going to fiddle it. Lucy, you're pretty well across this immigration data. Obviously, the argument has already been won in large part. But that isn't to say we wouldn't benefit from better data, not in and of itself, but as a way of trying to solve these things in the future. What do you think the most sketchy areas are? What do you think the government is going to try to do, the British state is going to try to do, to make sure that as little of the useful data is revealed to us as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, as we've discussed before, lots of these people will just be called British citizens, but it's actually, even if you are a second or third generation migrant, where are you? Where's your ethnicity? Where's your country of origin? We need that data, because it's no good to say, well, this person is a British citizen. And I always go back to the example of Imran Miller, who was at the Home Office in the asylum team, who was he was found out to be corrupt because he was saying to asylum seekers, well, I'm going to reject your asylum claim unless you pay me £2,000 or £3,000. And then if you dig into this case a bit more, Imran Mullah If you do a search, it sounds like a Muslim name. And if you look at the applicants that he was accepting into the country through his corrupt scheme, one was from Bangladesh and one was from Turkey, also from Muslim countries. And then you sort of have this really sort of chilling effect of, okay, so this is Imran Mullah who was caught out. How many more are doing this? I have submitted a freedom of information request to get this information. And what's worrying is that how can somebody such as Imran Mullah ever be working at the front line of our border in the first place?
Yes, outsourcing the defence of the homeland
exactly
to Imran Mullah. This understanding of citizenship is also incredibly perverse, in my opinion. But if you follow the logic through of this administrative account of identity, in other words, your identity is simply a function of whatever administrative papers you find yourself in possession of.
The Fraser Nelson position.
The Fraser Nelson position. There's nothing magic about these sorts of papers, but if you follow the logic of that through, were we say to we're a stupid government to unilaterally make every single member of the Russian army a British citizen, all of a sudden in our reporting we would have to say a bunch of British mercenaries today launched a refresh assault on Kharkiv. That would make sense as a statement, and yet it completely violates common sense to say that should be the case. We need to be making these more fine-grained distinctions between people's origin, their ethnic origin, and their the social facts that underlie their possession of certain administrative papers.
Yes, so just to add to that, I mean, we all saw the Daily Mail article which said, in Croatia, a woman was raped by 3 Brits abroad. And I even saw that and I thought, my gosh, that doesn't sound like what Brits abroad do. Yeah. Sure, they get a bit rowdy and have a few too many beers, but they wouldn't go and rape someone. And then when you looked and read the article, you found out that they were, of course, not British names, and I probably wouldn't stand a chance of pronouncing any of them, but they were Albanian and yet somehow were called Brits. Right. And so this is also tarnishing our reputation globally, and it's just completely unacceptable. And I think we need to hold people to account on this. This is a crime in itself.
That's actually really important. The international reputation point is really important. I've spoken to some people because I've been reporting on actually this exact issue with the Islamification of the Home Office. I've spoken to Peter before about the 700-member plus Home Office Islamic network that runs Prevent and calls people like us cultural nationalists who are concerned about immigration and integration and the challenges that presents as being right-wing extremist terrorists. But meanwhile, they say, well, Islamists don't actually represent anyone who themselves worship for Islam. We've seen as of this month, or this coming month rather, that because of Keir Starmer's recognition of a state of Palestine, but also because of concerns about Islamic infiltration in the intelligence services and the Home Office, now Israel is saying that we aren't an intelligence partner anymore. They're not going to share as much intelligence with us because we're not an ally. The United States State Department has been saying because of mass migration and the free speech restrictions on the native population, complaining about it that you had mentioned before, Harrison, they are deeply concerned about human rights violations in the UK, and this has become a major priority for JD Vance and Donald Trump's upcoming visit. Keir Starmer just lying to his face, saying that they're not censoring anyone when they absolutely are. So our international reputation is being tarnished as, at best, a total joke, at worst, a caliphate in waiting. And so we do need to get a handle on this before we become just a pariah state.
I'm just going to make one very quick point. Keir Starmer massively slipped when he made that remark next to Trump. No one really picked up on it, but he said, no, we have had free speech in this country for a long time. But then he added, however, our common law tradition has always distinguished between lawful speech and unlawful action, and there is a threshold on the rest of it. Exactly, that's right. The common law has made that distinction. So why do we need this fresh statutory legislation that has been being passed since 1986? Then why do we need, if this has already been settled by precedent, why the expansion of statute? No one asked that question, which is very annoying because he keeps speaking out of both sides of his mouth there. So Lucy, you recently have been talking about the need. So again, this information, sure, truth is, I suppose, valuable in and of itself, but it's also valuable because it helps you to do things. And there's no point just being, autistically obsessed with the data for its own sake, fun though that is. We also want the data to feed into a future motivated patriotic government that would actually do pro-British things. We've seen recently, we're talking off 20% of unemployed are foreign nationals. We have 1.2 million foreign nationals. Again, just foreign nationals. This doesn't include people who've been given citizenship who probably didn't deserve it, claiming universal credit. So we've got this sort of information. When we're talking about reversing the mass immigration experiment, rather than just studying it and examining the results, as those two data points do, what do you think are the most sort of promising lines of action when it comes to reversing the Boris wave in particular? You've been tweeting, I noticed recently, quite a lot about the consequences of the Boris wave and ILR and all the rest of it. What would a motivated future government do on those fronts?
Well, I think it's very simple, Harrison. We take the last 10 years and we review and possibly revoke a lot of the citizenships, visas, asylum seeker applications that were granted. Every single one of these needs to be thoroughly reviewed. Who granted this? If they are Imran Mullahs, were they? Why are there so many successful? I think it's 2/3 of asylum seeker applications at least are successful. Citizenship. If you look at the data, the raw data, which we have been spending a few days now breaking down, the majority of citizenship are going to sub-Saharan African nationalities and South Asian nationalities.
Correct.
So if you think about that, who is granting these citizenships and why? So I genuinely think we need to go back 10 years. Everyone that has been granted, citizenship, visa, asylum, we need to review them. Of course, some might be genuine. But
and ILR.
And ILR, of course.
Indefinite leave to remain. Sorry, just continue.
Yes, of course, ILR. I think the issue is, of course, it needs to be extended at least to 10 years, but it shouldn't be so accessible. The issue is you had people here in the Boris wave, and I just did some new data on this today. We found out that of the health and care worker visas, there would be one main applicant applying, but then that main applicant would on average bring another 4 people with them, and those dependents didn't even need to have any level of English proficiency.
Yes.
So you have one applicant coming with their family who don't even need to speak English, and this is catastrophic. And what's interesting is even the Labour government have realised how awful this is, because a few weeks ago, as of the 22nd of July, Labour have now said, okay, we are scrapping the health and care worker visas. There are no more new applicants. And those that are currently here on this health and care worker visa, they have until July 2028 to extend until, that's the maximum they can extend until. However, they might be able to stay in the UK through other routes, such as applying for a new visa or ILR, or just, as they typically do, just overstay illegally. And because we have an incompetent Home Office that loses track of how many migrants we have in the country, they might just stay here illegally and no one's going to know where they are, what they're doing.
The majority of illegal immigrants in this country are visa overstays. And
it was 1.2 million as of 2017. And then there was a former head of immigration at the Home Office in 2019 who said he estimates another 150,000 visa overstays happen every year.
Yeah.
Now that was at pre-Boris wave levels of migration, so that's probably at least trebled, plus the around 200,000 illegal migrants that we know have broken into the country as of 2018, either via small boat or lorry. We're looking at 2 to 3 million illegal migrants that are currently milling about in our country that we're paying for, plus the 7 billion we spend every year on refugee household, not just it being foreign nationals and universal credit, but particularly refugee households, plus all those dependents that you mentioned. I think it was Zimbabweans, should still be Rhodesia, have brought 10 to 1 dependents. Why are they bringing 10 family members over? You've got the Afghans. There was a judge that ruled that, well, in their culture, being a family member means something different. So you can bring up to 22 of your clan members over via family reunification and marriage visas. We had more, at the start of last year, more Somali family reunification visas than chemists, engineers and biologists from all other countries combined. But also, as far as the marriage visas go, when you said about being sub-Saharan African and South Asian visas, citizenship grants, I know Restore Britain have a policy that they've proposed saying they're going to make it easier for spousal visas to take place. The actual spousal visas that we know often happen with actual British nationals, like us three, are more likely to be from Anglosphere countries in Western Europe. So, James Price, for example, guest of the show, his wife is American and she now lives here. Whereas those communities that you mentioned marry very much in their ethnic in-group, so much so that there's cousin marriage rates of 40 to 60%. So they're definitely not marrying into our tribe. Like, we can look at all of these things as areas that says, right, these people shouldn't be here, these people shouldn't be here. And you can just start striking people off, either whether it's repealing citizenship grants, repealing asylum grants, or using the Simon Begum principle to just evict people to other countries. By the thousands of millions.
But it's funny because on the one hand, the claim there by the judge is that, well, family life is construed differently in Afghanistan to how it is here. So cultures are different, it turns out. But then also all cultures are the same. So but the proposition that all cultures are the same and the proposition that all cultures are different mutually justify the policy.
And even though family life means something different over there, they're still extended the right to a family life as recognised by the European Convention of Human Rights.
And it assumes a one-size-fits-all model of... Like, they have a one-size-fits-all model of the family unification principle, which when you're talking about small nuclear families, does make a modicum of sense. But when you're talking about, and just even in raw logistical economic terms, even assuming that these individual social care workers, I think I always forget what the statistic is, but there's a pretty extraordinary statistic showing that only, what was it 12,000 of 85,000?
It was a study that Miriam Cates did about 2 years ago of the health and social care visas handed out in 2023. Of the 70,000 main applicant health and social care visas, they only filled 11,000 vacancies.
That's right.
So they showed up and then just buggered off into the Deliveroo economy.
But even if we were to assume, I don't want to concede on the empirical front, so that's important that people remember that. But even assuming that these people are contributing in some way, whether through their work or through taxes or both, if they're working, they will be paying taxes.
No, but they're paid by taxes.
Say that again. No, well, that's true too. But let's say, that's a good point. Okay, but let's even just assume that as individuals, they are making a net fiscal contribution in some form, construed broadly. Assume that if you're bringing 11 dependents with you, it more than cancels out any contribution that you are theoretically making. And I dare say that I don't see how immigrants who are unable to support themselves while here, I fail to see how they can be supporting us.
Yeah, but this is because we don't abide by the doctrine of universal human rights that says that literally every single person would be as British as you and I if afforded the proper paperwork, if they were not geographically dislocated from us, and if they stepped through the passport gates of Heathrow and Gatwick and absorbed via osmosis all our wonderful culture of democracy and human rights and cricket.
Yeah, well, quite. Do you think, Lucy, that so it seems to me that the indefinite leave to remain category probably should remain in place. Hear me out here, but I don't think that it should come with any perks. It's not. There probably is room in our law for a kind of permanent residency style status, an indefinite residency style status that doesn't quite meet the threshold of citizenship, but nor is it a sort of a short-term visa, because then you have a happy situation in which, let's assume that you do have an immigrant who is making some form of contribution. They are here, and you don't cause oodles of social disruption by deporting people en masse, but nor do you cheapen the concept of British citizenship by giving them those rights. Would you want to scrap indefinite leave to remain altogether as a category, a sort of intermediary category between visa and citizenship, or would you just want to take away perks involved, extend it? How would you conceive that problem?
I think it really depends. It definitely needs to be extended because 5 years is obviously insane. Anyone can just study in a country, go and work for a few years or 5 years, and then why should they become British citizenship? It doesn't quite make any sense. But I think who we give ILR to, that should be a big question because, Europeans like Italians or French, they often come and get ILR. I don't have any problem with that. I have a problem with the ones, from other parts of the world that come here, take ILR and just abuse the system. And I think what's interesting, if we look at the NHS, for example, so let's go back to that point where we said around 1.26 million foreign nationals are claiming universal credit. The whole idea of the NHS in 1948 is that it was created as a safety net, so that if you fell on hard times, you would access it temporarily. You would contribute to it and only take out if you were in hardship. So the fact that we have foreign nationals here, as we've said, 1 in 5 who are unemployed, taking from universal credit is just insanity. It's suicidal because they haven't contributed. They keep taking out. And we need to start putting ourselves first. All of these things, we obviously know they need to end. The question is, What I'm worried about is if we have another 4 years of this until the next general election, it's just how much more can we take? We need to start reversing this damage now, because the more that come, the more mess there is to clean up.
Sam Bidwell had, again, friend of the show, a good proposal on ILR that I think he wrote out the ability for the Home Secretary to just sign this off, because you don't need to pass primary legislation to change ILR. You can just, as the Home Secretary, sign it via fiat. He said it would be a good idea to extend it to 15 years and then also confine the countries that are given ILR in lieu of granting people citizenship. That's actually not an idea I'd considered, but that's also possible. But limit the countries to Western Europe, the Anglosphere, and Asian tiger economies, meaning South Korea and Japan, because you're not getting massive Japanese chain migration. If we did, maybe the transport system might work a bit better. I don't know. But the reason that we should restrict from those countries, and this is sort of hidden in the immigrant data or foreign national data, because it actually gives those countries a bad name. For example, I mean, we've had 100,000 Hong Kong refugees. We can talk about whether or not it was wise to take that scale, but there's been no Hong Kong grooming gangs. There's been no massive uptick in Hong Kong crime, for example. They've been mostly quiet and industrious. So giving them a bad name is not particularly fair compared to the Pakistanis, the Afghanis, anywhere in the third world. And the reason that we can know that these third worlders are not going to be productive, they're not going to fit in, they're only going to be clannish, they're going to commit more crime, is the mindset of the third world. Ayaan Hirsi Ali described this really well in Heretics, where she said the reason the Muslim world don't plan for the long term is because there's a fundamental fatalism about their worldview. Like, she was describing Somalis showing up in Holland, just throwing litter on the floor, and when they were asked, well, why are you throwing Coke cans and gum everywhere, why don't you clean up your area? It's because they were like, well, I might die tomorrow if Allah wills it, so why would I plan long term?
That explains Birmingham then, doesn't it?
Yeah, or Leicester or Luton, or take your pick. There was a really good cartoon I saw from a children's book, actually. This is where I get most of my political opinions, where it's like Spot the dog or whatever, and he lives in a house, and he's like, Spot has a hole in his roof. When it's sunny, he doesn't need to repair it because it's very nice. When it rains, it's too wet to work. And he just said, and this is why the third world don't build anything.
That's right.
We shouldn't be importing people with that mindset, because no wonder 95% of them, according to Carl Williams' research, don't make tax contributions because they don't plan long term, they don't work, and they're just here for free money.
Yeah, but I'm just toying with it. But my solution at the moment would be something much along the lines that I said: indefinite leave to remain. You call it that, call it something else. Indefinite residency. But another benefit of indefinite residency as well is that if, for whatever reason, someone who has acquired that status then commits a crime, they're not registered as one of your citizens, and you can just deport them back to their home country, because you wouldn't be making them stateless, because they are not anchored to your state, because they've not been given that administrative document.
It's the house guest principle, basically.
Yeah, indeed. And then you would just take away any perks associated with it. And people who complain that that's unjust, you just come back to them and say, well, you're saying that these people are supporting our economy. That's your claim. That's the only argument you've got left. You've given up on spicy food.
Robert Toombs hasn't.
Robert Toombs hasn't. That's true. You've given up on all sorts of on all these sort of vibrancy-based arguments. All you're left with is sort of, how are we going to prop up our economy that has come to depend on this as much as an addict depends on his happy powder. Well, we can't go cold turkey. That's far too dangerous. Their whole point now is economic. And so if we point out that, well, immigrants, if they're supporting themselves, I'm sorry, if they're supporting us, they don't exactly need our support then in return, do they? It would basically get rid of that major case, and then you could cause minimal social disruption. People can just be within that intermediary category, and it wouldn't dilute the self-determination rights of the host population, assuming you get rid of Commonwealth voting as well, which is also another important thing. It seems to me like a good way of proceeding. Have I got anything wrong there, do you think, Lucy?
No, I agree. I would just add as well, what's interesting is, the argument of these left liberals. They always say multiculturalism is great, they can integrate. Mm-hmm. But we know for a fact that they do not integrate. Why? Let's take a few examples. If you look at the Muslim communities, they form sectarian voting blocks as we've seen in Bradford and Tower Hamlets, etc. And the reason why politicians are so scared of the Muslim vote is because they are the Muslim vote. They are not British. If they were integrated, there wouldn't be the Muslims. It's not like you have the Sikhs and the Hindus and the Christians. But I mean,
you do. You hang on. You absolutely do. Like, the Conservative Party has been remade in the image of the Hindutva. You had Priti Patel saying that Indian diaspora communities are living bridges. I agree. The reason the politicians are afraid of the Muslim vote is because they're a lot more sectarian. But I think actually the reason is because they know the Muslims are violent. Like, they're not going to get their heads cut off by a Sikh even though they're carrying swords. I still think that if the Sikhs are petitioning for Khalistan, as they were campaigning for in Leicester Square like 2 months ago, it's a bad thing. I don't want it in my country. But the main reason they're worried about Islam is because if they speak ill of it, well, they get blown up.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course, I agree with that. So if you look at, like, sort of by Heathrow Airport, a lot of the communities there are Indian, and they actually have Indian MPs as well. So, of course, you're absolutely correct, Connor. But so going back to, say, any of these groups, the fact that they are their own groups just shows that they are not British because they have their own interests.
That's right.
Which do not align with our interests.
Yes.
So you have a conflict of interest. And also the issue is, I did a tweet which went viral, 5 million views for some reason, that I came to Heathrow Airport and was not happy that I heard all the staff speaking in Hindi or other languages. And I fly in and out of Heathrow all the time. And nothing's ever changed. This is consistent. And so, those that argue that, yes, they can integrate, well, then why are they not speaking English? Why are they speaking another language? Even if they are second generation, why are they not? The fact that they're not speaking English just shows that they failed to integrate.
Completely. Pick your point. Is your point that they have assimilated to such a seamless extent that they're unnoticeable and the only thing noticeable about them is their economic contribution? Or do they need their own little community leaders, their own little special representatives? Do they have a right to organise collectively in a way which, if you complain about, you are the one who gets accused of being some kind of racial collectivist when you're simply just pointing out the brazen ethnocentrism and racial collectivism of indigestible subcultures in your own country? You don't have Huguenot interest groups operating up and down the land saying, we want more Huguenot football managers, we want more Huguenot midwives to be treating Huguenot, because they have become an unnoticeable feature of the British population. This has not happened overwhelmingly. It doesn't say there won't be small cases in which maybe it has, but overwhelmingly this is not something that has happened with third world immigration, not just from 97 onwards, frankly from 1948 onwards.
Well, exactly. We've got pro-Windrush poetry now being broadcast as if it was Britain's Mayflower on Tube. But when we had the Hong Kongers, or when we've had, even before Brexit, when we had the transitory, mainly working European migrants, you didn't have advertisements for Catholic aid written in Polish on the tube barriers, but you do have relentless signs to give us a cat, whatever the bloody hell that means, on tube barriers that are not just in areas like Whitechapel and Tower Hamlets, which, they're desolate wastelands as far as the British host majority's demographics are concerned, but all across the network. Because now they realise that there's a concentrated tribal minority that they themselves can market to, and that is growing in prominence across the city, not just because of the interconnectivity of the transport network, but because increasingly, because of unaffordability, but also just hostility. It's horrible around here. The white British host majority are fleeing their cities in droves. I mean, I think we need an emergency census. That's another thing that we should be pushing for. I think Restore did actually
You have talked about
that.
this, yes.
Because last time we checked London, it was minority white British. I would be shocked if it wasn't, if it was as low as a third now, because we were saying this on the walk up. It's just really unpleasant to go around, and our tolerance for visiting this place has just plummeted.
Yeah, the issue is, as a white English lady, I just want to enjoy my city and my country in a certain way, and I now no longer can do that. I was saying to Connor how I was in a well-known London park yesterday, minding my own business, and then two people decided to literally sit right next to me despite having the whole park. They laid out their mats and they started praying and bowing, and I'm just like, why do I tolerate this? But going back to the census, so as we know, it's every 10 years. The next one is in 2031. But the 2021 census did not take account of the Boris wave. In 2023 alone, there was net migration of 906,000 people. That's almost 1 million net each year in that 1 year. And 85% of those were non-EU. And in my opinion, the term non-EU is a way for the government to gaslight us, because these are not just non-EU, i.e. Americans or Canadians or New Zealanders. These non-EU are all from third world countries, primarily.
Even the 90,000 Chinese students that show up leave, the rest of them stay in. So even that's like, even when you're saying non-EU and you're including them in there, you're not admitting that the vast majority of them stay as well. But
Yeah, I think we should start recording in gross terms as well. Otherwise, you don't get a sufficient sense of a churn. Even assuming you had a really optimal net negative immigration policy, if you still had huge numbers of white British people leaving, but then just small numbers of people from the Mirpur region of Pakistan coming in, like the person who is just logistically pursuing net negative immigration would say mission accomplished, and I don't really regard that as an achievement. Very quickly, before we close out, I want to ask both of you, I think there's no question that there's a lot of latent energy in this country at the moment, and I mean on our side of things, like that's where the creativity and is in British politics at the moment. Undoubtedly, in the intellectual energy, it's on the right. It's not anywhere else. Problem is that we're struggling to channel this in institutional terms and in an effective way. How do you think we can convert that over the next 4 years or so? How should we best convert that latent energy into sort of practical solutions? Because I think people are tired of the talk, and they're right to be, but there's little else we can do at the moment.
I do think the talk is still useful as long as it's treading new ground. So this is why I use my personal work for an example. A year ago, people didn't know what right coup was. And so I'm just repeatedly hammering home that the Home Office is basically controlled by an Islamic cabal, right? And until you raise this salience, first with the population, but predominantly with the politicians, who either know this is going on, have been inactive, or it hasn't been on their radar because it wasn't on their ministerial brief, then no action gets taken. But I do agree with you in that we are way behind the Americans on institution building. I mean, you spend a fair amount of time in Washington. You know how many flowers are blooming over there. Even when they're in government, there are still new right-wing institutions popping up to hold the Trump administration to account, to make sure it doesn't rest on its laurels, basically. I think initiatives like Restore, initiatives like the think tank that James Orr has set up, hopefully things like Courage Media and that, are going to create a right-wing ecosystem that means that the major parties, the Conservative Party, Reform, whatever else springs up in the meanwhile, isn't consistently seeking the approval of the enemy camp, because then it swims in the leftward wake of Cthulhu, rather than seeing that there's a much larger power base that is representative of the vast majority of the British population who, just last week polled 45% in favour of reversing mass immigration by sending even legal migrants home, and the 53% that said, we don't think Islam's compatible with Britain. Right. And nobody's even touched that barge pole yet in mainstream politics besides Ben Habib. I think that issue in particular is going to get really salient in the coming years.
Do you think that we've, in the main, done a good job of putting pressure on Reform? And they would probably be reluctant to acknowledge that, attribute it to us, but it does seem to me that they have radicalised a little bit. And I mean, Sarah Pochin yesterday was talking about how the culture of Islam is incompatible with women's rights, and banning the burqa, and now they do seem to be committed to a policy of mass deportation. Is just keep the pressure building, I would imagine. Don't you think, Lucy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Reform, it's really hard to say. I was, very supportive of them back in, November, for example. But now I have less support for them because of a few things, from, exiling Rupert Lowe to now we have Layla Cunningham, this, et cetera, et cetera.
Muslim mum of 7 that's replaced Ant Middleton.
Precisely, Connor. You took the words out of my mouth. So I think, but going back to your original question as to, we've been talking about this, what can we actually do? I think we need to look at these DEI hiring policies, because I think the moment white English or white British people are being subjected to discrimination in the workplace, that is when it's affected their lives, and that is when things start to become reality. So we've seen the MI6 and MI5, they will now only hire, for summer internships, those from ethnic minority backgrounds. We've seen that the civil service will now only hire summer internships for those from working class background, depending on what job their parents were doing when they were 14. All this ludicrous thing. So I think we've been talking, but now it's going to start impacting. People are waking up to what's happening because it's going to impact them directly. And I think now that more people are aware, because, it's very easy to swallow the mainstream media, the BBC, but to start challenging that narrative and challenging everything you've been taught, possibly at school or university, just as what we're doing, we're challenging it. More and more people are aware. And I think, as Connor and I were saying, our intolerance is just, it's ended now.
Through the roof.
Yeah, so I don't mind what you call me. I know that what I'm saying is correct. So I can take all this name calling now. It doesn't bother me because I know I'm on the right side of history, essentially. I think what we've got to continue doing is over the next 4 years, we've got to push Restore Britain. We have to make it something that's going to be tangible, that will bring results. We need to, we just need to be ready. And I'm hoping that there will be a snap election before that.
Yeah.
But we've just got to keep doing what we do, I think.
Yeah, there's definite preference cascade of the way underway, and I think we can help it along, and I think events will help it along as well. The more it becomes clear to people that the stakes have risen, and it's a choice between being called nasty names and losing your country, the choice will make itself, and hopefully we can make it easier for them by making all of our mischievous public pronouncements. Lucy, thank you so much for joining us on Deprogrammed. Connor, thank you very much for joining us as ever. You've been watching Deprogrammed. Make sure to like, subscribe, do leave a comment if you wish to do so, and we shall see you on the next.
Our mission at the New Culture Forum is and always has been to defend and celebrate Britain's history, culture, and its people, and indeed Western civilization, at a time when both are under sustained attack. We have grown from small beginnings to become the country's most influential right-leaning cultural think tank. Our content is watched and read by some of Britain's most influential political figures. But now, we need your help. If you believe in what we do, then please do become a member. For as little as £4 a month, you can make a vital contribution to what we do. As a member of the NCF family, you will help ensure that we can continue to produce quality content online, such as our 3 weekly programs, Whittle, which is our flagship interview show, Newspeak, our panel discussion show, and Deprogrammed, which is targeted at Britain's youth. As you probably know, in addition, we produce important documentaries, such as our critically acclaimed 6-part series, The West, a stunning celebration of the history and genius of Western civilization, and our ongoing documentary series, Heresies, with hard-hitting episodes tackling subjects such as immigration, gender ideology, and BBC bias. But the New Culture Forum is much more than a YouTube channel. We don't just complain about Britain as it is, we provide real solutions and clear policies on how we can push back against the madness and restore sanity to this nation. Our presenters are now highly sought after and have become familiar faces across the media. Our prestigious annual Smith Lecture and our regional and indeed national conferences have attracted world-class speakers. Perhaps most importantly, we are the only organisation on the right of politics that has launched a national movement without actually being a political party. And uniquely, through our NCF Locals programme, we've established some 30 active branches in towns and cities right across the nation, from Edinburgh to Exeter, and with many more on the way. We're very proud of what we've achieved, and our members have made it possible. In return, our members receive access to exclusive content, invitations to private events, free or discounted tickets to our conferences and lectures, free copies of our books, and much more. I very much hope that you'll join us too by clicking the link in the description or going to our website, newcultureforum.org.uk. Now is the time that we need your help. Thank you.